Yes, and with that, we are live. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the 24th episode of the TechForge podcast. I am joined once again this week by my faithful co-hosts, Jason and Hunter.
Hey.
I don't want
to. Too bad.
Well,
bang. Hi.
Gentlemen, it's good to have both of you back this week. Since we had
good to be back.
Yeah, we had to run the show a little short last week, little short-handed last week.
Oh, that's right. We have the Protoss here in spirit.
Yes, we
did. Because somebody was off spiritualizing and conceptualizing and making his inner core stronger.
Thankfully, we can get right back into it this week. And we're actually able to record on when we normally record so that everybody can be here.
Yeah.
All right. So, Hunter, you have some big news, as I understand it.
I do. On my regular computer, in the 600T Corsair, for some reason stopped working, and I've been a little busy to figure it out. But I've had this sleeper build, this Dell Optiplex sleeper build idea for a while. And because I need a computer this weekend for something I can't talk about, that I'll probably be able to talk about later at some down the line, I needed to build a computer. So I decided to jump on the parts list I have and get it going, and I'll probably build it tomorrow. I've got, because I don't want to have SATA data cable and power cable, I want to shrink down the cables as much as I can. I have a motherboard that has, and I'll reveal the details at a later time after I actually build it, a motherboard that has two M.2 slots on it, and I have two M.2 drives now. And it's a micro ATX computer. I wanted to do it in the Optiplex because they're not built for it, for one, so it makes it perfect for sleeper build. And it's really just, can I do it? The plan is to do liquid cooling in it. If I have to, a 120 millimeter for the CPU and GPU is the plan. If I can do it, it would be custom liquid cooling. I know Linus has built a sleeper build, 2 sleeper builds now. He did a lot of work with those. I'm trying to do if I can do it. So I'll see how it goes. And I'll reveal, I'll take pictures while I'm building. And I'll reveal it when it's all done.
Very cool. Well, we'll be excited to see what it looks like when it's finished. Nope, I think we just lost Jason.
Yep.
Uh-oh. Let me see what's going on. Well, while we try to get him back, let's jump into the first topic on our list. And that is a little bit of conflicting information I found about the GTX 1070. Apparently, the GTX 1070 was first announced to be going to have GDDR5X memory included in a kind of like what they did with the GTX 1060 a couple of weeks ago. And then a couple of counter articles that say not so much. So, hey, Jason, you're back.
Hey, sorry about that. I lost connection. I'm on a wireless here, so.
Okay, gotcha.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep. Can hear you just fine. We were just about to jump into the first topic about the GTX 1070 that seems to have Schrodinger's GDDR5X memory, because it both has it and it doesn't, depending on which articles you look at.
I was going to talk about my purchase, but man.
Oh, you made a purchase as well?
Yes. I made 2 mentions of it in Facebook.
All right, let's talk about that.
Fluid Gaming.
Oh, you finally went with the EK kit.
Yep.
Which one?
I got the A120 mainly, and then I bought a bunch of parts around it. So with the Mesh 5C, with my current config and the tall memory, I can't put a top mount, but I need about 480 millimeters of radiator to cool my parts, because I'm heavily boosting the 2700X. So usually when you're overclocking parts like that, you want to configure, if you're running stock, like right around 120 millimeter per part, so like 120 for the CPU and 120 for the GPU, stock is usually good. But with Vega overclocked especially, you want to give that about 240, if not slightly more. And then with a slightly boosted or heavily boosted 2700X, 240 is probably good. But I think I can get by with a 120 there. So I'm going to put so I bought a 360 radiator on top of the 120. I'm going to mount a 120 in the back as exhaust, and then a 360 in the front. 360 is going to be all intake and a pull config. And then I ordered some other, angled fittings and stuff. I might have to order a few more fittings because I want the build to look really good. And then I ordered the mount for the pump to mount to a fan. So it's going to be kind of a tight fit. The pump and reservoir combo is going to go on the back. Like, I'm going to mount it to the back fan / radiator. So
gotcha.
It's going to be, I'm excited because while the Morpheus 2 cooler on the Vega has been nice, VRMs are still a little hot, and I'm not too happy about that. That's mainly my motivation for getting this. Otherwise, I've been pretty happy with just running a 240 in the front.
That's
240 AIO.
That's my ultimate, and that is my ultimate goal. Also, is to have the EK. I would like to do EK. Was it G240R? Maybe with some extra parts also.
Oh, the 240G, the Fluid Gaming kit?
No, the 240R. If I could do the 240G because I already have a NVIDIA graphics card, so it wouldn't be a problem. I just kind of want to try out an RX card, so I'd have to get the 240R.
I think they're discontinuing that kit. I can't find it online, and every time I ask EKWB support for it, they don't have it. But
Newegg still has it.
They do?
Yeah, for 240.
Nice.
For 240.
240,
which is a good price. Yeah, pretty much.
For a loop like
almost 300. It's almost 300 on EK's website. It's 240 or 250 on Newegg for the same thing.
Can't argue with that.
Yeah.
Well, and the reason I went with Fluid Gaming, the challenge is going to be draining it. There's no drain plug or drain. People have come up with some pretty creative ways to do it. I'm going to have to explore that. It's going to be fun. The reason I went Fluid Gaming is mainly price. Like, it cost me $370 for the whole thing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, a similarly priced kit through the configurator on EKWB for copper would have been $700. So,
ouch.
Yeah. I've looked at that too. And the Fluid Gaming kit is so much cheaper.
And it cools pretty much the same, unless you go with
Yeah, I mean,
some of the more exotic radiators, like the super thick ones or whatever. So
Kyle and Bitwit Kyle and Jay from Jay's 2 Cents did videos on the 240G and found it to be actually adequate.
yeah, surprisingly,
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it. I got green coolant too.
Nice.
Nice. And Jay said that if you do water cooling, you have to drain it once a year. Drain it and then refill it once a year.
Yeah.
To at least, to clean all the stuff.
Which
And
reminds
once a
me,
year is not
it's
that
about
bad.
time for me to do that with my my H220X from SwiftTech.
Do you have a drain port?
So the H220X is kind of odd in that the radiator and the reservoir and the pump are all kind of integrated together, but it's designed to be expandable. So it has standard.
You got the SwiftTech.
Yeah, the SwiftTech H220X.
Yeah. Okay.
So it was designed to be expandable because it's basically one of their heat killer blocks combined with their 240 millimeter radiator, but it has an integrated pump and reservoir combo attached to it. But it uses standard 5/8 inch inner diameter tubing so that you can just, remove the tubes, drain the system, and then if you want to expand it, all you have to do is add your blocks for your GPU or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
That's
of
a
course,
nice looking setup. It's got a reservoir in the radiator.
Yeah, that's.
Yep.
It's basically it's an open liquid cooling loop that is put together like a closed loop AIO, but is designed to be expandable into a full open loop setup if you so wish.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think I'm going to have to do one of two things here soon, because I'm running the Cooler Master Case 5T, and I realize I'm going completely off topic here, but since we're on the subject, I'm running the Cooler Master Case 5T. Excellent case in most respects. The one caveat about it is, with a setup like mine with cross-fired RX 480s and an 1800X, even with the H220 cooler, I run into problems where the system will overheat unless I take off the front panel. And that's with 3 Thermaltake Ring 120 fans, which are pretty solid fans as intakes. And it's just that there's not enough room for it to properly intake air through the mesh side vents. If I take off the acrylic piece on the front, though, I haven't had any overheating issues at all.
Yeah, that's the problem with having acrylic in the front.
And so I'm thinking probably what I'm going to do is I'm going to dig out my old Corsair 600T and probably migrate the system over to that when it comes time for me to do my annual system maintenance.
What kind of fans do you have mounted? Those are the Thermaltake TTs, right?
Yeah, the TT120s, the ring fans.
Yeah, that's right. We were talking about that. Are those static pressure? Are those a hybrid?
I think they're a hybrid fan. Without looking them up, I can't be 100%, but
so I want to say a good static pressure fan might be. After I get the loop set up, do you want me to send you my Noctua PPCs? Try out?
I would certainly consider it.
They're very high static pressure. I mean, they're for 120. I don't think you get any better. But I've only got 2 of them.
I think the other problem I might have is, again, it's due to the Master Case 5T. Its design the way it's put together is intentionally positive pressure because it only has one exhaust fan. And so positive pressure does have the issue where if you can't properly exhaust all the heat fast enough, you can run into overheating problems.
Oh, because it circulates.
Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the other reasons I'm looking at moving to a different case like the 600T, because don't get me wrong, I love the look of the acrylic front cases, but they can be restrictive on airflow because all the air has to make a 90-degree turn when it comes into the case.
Yeah.
Another thing
is that case modular? Like, can you take off the acrylic front?
If it was the master box, yes. Unfortunately, it is the previous version, the master case.
Another thing to consider
probably because
go ahead.
Probably because the top I/O stuff, you'd have to have a mesh front panel that has space for that stuff. That's what's
Yeah. And maybe I can get this on screen here. Like this is the front panel to the master case. You can see it's a bit dusty because I've had it off the case for a while. But you can see that's all there is for air intake on each side. You can see how small that is.
Yeah. That looks like the metal does.
That is a hybrid fan. It's not specifically static pressure or high airflow. It's in between. Okay.
Yeah,
but yeah, so that's one thing I'm looking at for the future is switching to a higher airflow case, either digging out my old 600T, or if I wound up, maybe getting a Christmas bonus or something where I can have a little extra money to spend, looking at getting something like maybe the Meshify.
Yeah.
Well, Meshify
I would say if you can't
solve your problem. Go ahead, sorry.
That'd be funny because I'm thinking about going to the Meshify C for when I get out of the Optiplex case. That'd be funny if all three of us have Meshify C.
I mean, the Meshify is a very solid case.
It's super solid.
It's $90 on Newegg right now. At least from what I saw.
Yeah, I wish I could have got it during the Black Friday deals because Black Friday, the white version with tempered glass was $75.
Nice.
Dang.
Well, I'll say this: I'm putting in 350 to 400 watts of heat. I'm just dumping it in the case, and I've got two Fractal Design, Dynamic X2 PWM fans as exhaust, one on the top, one in the back. I never have any heating issues at all. It gets hot. It gets hot. You can feel it. It's not super duper hot, but it's able to intake enough air to cool and exhaust enough air.
Yeah,
it doesn't take long for it to get all of it out.
That's the one other half measure I'm considering is there is a place to put a 140 millimeter fan in the top of the Master Case 5T. And so I'm considering mounting maybe an airflow fan there that will helpfully exhaust heat out the top of the case in addition to the 120 exhausting heat out the back of the case. And that might help a little bit with the positive pressure problem as well.
Yeah, the only thing I could recommend is to get static pressure fans, like specifically static pressure fans for the front, and then high airflow fans for the back, and then play around with your fan curves. You know,
that's the next step.
Use
So you said you have a
Unigen Heaven or Furmark or something, and see how it goes.
Anyway, before we got off on this tangent, ladies and gentlemen, we were going to talk about some of the tech news. And we're still going to talk about some of the tech news. We're just taking the roundabout way to get there.
Yeah. Scenic route.
Yep.
Anyway, as I was saying before we got off on that tangent, there's some conflicting information about a potential new variant for the GTX 1070. Earlier this week, Zotac leaked, apparently accidentally put out a listing showing a GTX 1070 with GDDR5X memory. And apparently Tech PowerUp picked this up, and it caused quite a stir in the tech community because there was already previous evidence. NVIDIA, of course, released the GTX 1060 with GDDR5X memory as an attempt to kind of use up the remaining slightly defective GTX 1080 stock. Because unlike the GTX 1060 6 gig, this GDDR5X variant was really just a cut down GTX 1070, leading some to believe that it was NVIDIA attempting to offload some of their defective GTX 1070 and 1080 dies. And so with this coming out about a GTX 1070 with GDDR5X, again, this was speculation. This was another way for NVIDIA to offload some of their defective GTX 1080 dies. But I've linked in the articles down below in the one tab link the original article from Tech PowerUp, which generated so many other articles. But then there was another article from PC Gamer claiming that this was all just a mistake, that Zotac is claiming that the GDDR5X was simply a typo from when they copy-pasted some of the information from a different model. And so the curious thing is, so far, the PC Gamer article is the only one I've found that is making this claim, that this is in fact a mistake. All the others have maintained their original articles and have not updated them. And so that leaves me with...
PC Gamer is usually on point, you know?
Yeah, and that's my point, is the fact that PC Gamer is pointing out that, well, this was just a mistake, but all the other major tech outlets haven't, makes me wonder if it really is a mistake or if this is something that Zotac accidentally leaked.
Is there drama in the tech industry? Dun, dun, dun. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah. So, like I said, I linked the original Tech PowerUp article where, you know, they pointed to the fact that NVIDIA does have a stockpile of GDDR5X that they have unsold because they ramped up production for the cryptocurrency boom, and then the cryptocurrency boom went bust, leaving them holding the bag with a lot of GPUs and a lot of GDDR5 and GDDR5X. So all I can say at this point is if it is indeed a mistake, it'll come out soon enough. If it isn't, though, and other companies start coming out with GTX 1070s with GDDR5X, then we could be seeing yet another NVIDIA variant out there before, as they try to get rid of stock from the previous 10th generation, and as they try to encourage people to move to the 20 series. Which, a quick aside here, apparently they did some optimization work in Battlefield 5, and they're claiming a 50% in performance improvement with DXR ray tracing. Which there's been several tech outlets that have tested that, and that is indeed pretty much the case. They saw, I know Hardware and Box saw improvements between 46 and 53% at DXR low settings. The problem is that it's still turning DXR even on low, still basically cuts your frame rate in half, regardless of what resolution you're working with. But I suppose the bright spot in it is that Whereas previously the RTX 2070 was basically useless with DXR enabled, it can now actually play 1080p 60 FPS with DXR enabled.
Was essentially useless. It's still useless.
And so at this point, if they do put out a GTX 1070 with GDDR5X, I think it will find a willing audience, because right now a lot of enthusiasts are not terribly enthused with RTX.
Yeah, one thing I'm going to say is the ray tracing. To me, it's more like a cosmetic skin in Fortnite, and not going to make me like, what are you going to do? Just stand there like, wow, this looks so great. That's my opinion.
It's not just a skin. It's an expensive skin with performance issues. Like,
yeah, it's
well,
like,
well, what I mean is it's just making stuff look pretty and not really doing anything to benefit like gamers. So it's downgrading your FPS just to make things look pretty.
yeah.
So it's not really, to me, it's not really worth it. Like we've all been saying, it's not really worth it, especially at the price point.
Yeah. It's not. It's not. It's super expensive, and it's got a heavy performance penalty right now.
yeah,
In one game.
It's
one game.
It's funny that I'm in 3 Facebook tech groups, gaming or PC building groups or PC enthusiasts and gaming, and people are like, look at me, I just got a 2080 Ti, or I got a 2080 or whatever. It's like, okay.
It's
really gonna, yeah.
I would tend to agree. For me, at least, the value is just not there yet in the RTX series. Of course, we're going to be adding a new member to the RTX family, which we will be discussing here in just a few minutes. But, well, that one's not exactly a bang for your buck value either, for reasons that will be made obvious. Speaking of GPUs, though, we have an interesting bit here. This one from Tom's Hardware, from a company you may not have heard of. And that company is InnoDisk.
Right.
And so what they have done is they have launched an ultra slim graphics card that fits in an M.2 form factor. Yes, the same form factor you would normally use for your NVMe SSDs. Apparently, though, this particular graphics card, which is built on the M.2 2280 standard, meaning it's 22 millimeters wide and 80 millimeters long, is built with Silicon Motion's SM768 4K graphics controller. Meaning that for a system that just needed basic graphics that didn't have an integrated controller, you could put this in and display resolutions of up to 1920 by 1080 at 60 hertz, or 4K 3840 by 2160 at 30 hertz.
Mm-hmm.
They have a block diagram here that shows that it's using an ARM Cortex-R5 processor at its center with a DDR2 or DDR3 memory controller and a whole bunch of connectivity. But what strikes me as interesting about this, obviously, this is not going to replace your RX Vega or your GTX 1080 or your RTX 2080 Ti. What this is meant for is more for embedded systems and for, maybe the server market.
Yeah, low power. It's a very interesting setup. Uh, M.2 at its heart is really just a different form factor for PCI Express bus. So uh, it continues to impress me with its flexibility, and this is just another example of that. This is awesome. I'd like to see more of this kind of stuff.
Yep.
There's lots of applications for this.
Yeah. In addition, it is equipped to handle HDMI, LVDS, and DVI-D output.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to connect it to the back of the case, or in the case of LVDS, likely your laptop's video display.
On top of that, it's got. Didn't they say it had like an industrial grade temperature range? Where did I see
Yes,
that?
it can operate in temperatures from negative 40 degrees Celsius up to 85 degrees Celsius.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Because your typical graphics card from, say, NVIDIA or AMD, yes, they can operate in higher temperatures, but they typically can't operate that low. I was going to say, I think the TJ Maxx on the current RTX series is something like 86 degrees Celsius.
Mm-hmm.
But the low temperature, I don't think you can handle that cold, that negative 40 degrees.
And the M.2 spec limits power consumption to 7 watts. So it's doing all of that work at 7 watts of power or less.
Right.
That's very, very impressive. Very impressive.
And apparently it works in Windows 7, 8, 10, and Windows Server, along with Ubuntu Linux, Red Hat Linux, SUSE, Mac OS X, Android, Chrome OS, and Linux multi-seat server. So, unfortunately, they did not reveal a price as of yet. If you want more technical detail, I also linked over to AnonTech, where they take a look at it as well. They list a lot of the same information, but they also link to the information about the Silicon Motion SM768 controller, as well as the original page from InnoDisk themselves.
Well, that's kind of special. That's kind of specialty, right? I doubt there's going to be any pricing available.
Still, it is. It's fascinating to think that at some point in the future, we could, instead of connecting through a PCI times 16 slot, we could have a graphics chip powerful enough and small enough that we could connect it through an M.2 connector.
Well, PCI Express 4.0 is just around the corner, and that's going to increase bandwidth. So we could potentially see something close to PCI Express 3 X16 bandwidth, and maybe as something as small as an M.2. So I have to look at the bandwidth, because what do we have now? M.2 at 4x?
Yeah, PCIe 3.0 at 4 speed.
So I need to look at the bandwidth of 4.0. Because I think from 2 to 3 it doubled bandwidth, right? So
right.
I don't know what.
So we have 8.
I don't know. It's whatever the spec is. I'm not really sure. I would assume that there's going to be an increase in bandwidth, though.
When it gets to X16, it would basically be a video card.
Well, if 4.0 is double what 3 is, then X8 4.0 is equal to
times 16.
Yeah.
Because that's the way it was with 3.0 to 2.0. PCIe 2.0 times 16 was roughly equivalent to PCI 3.0 times 8.
So that would be interesting if there could be like an NVIDIA I could only see that for laptops, and probably not a high end, probably a low end video card M.2.
And honestly, right now, with Intel's SoC approach, their integrated graphics would probably be a better solution, at least from a financial standpoint at that point.
Yeah.
And speaking of SoC style solutions, we don't normally cover mobile hardware here, but I thought this was important for a couple of reasons. And that's the announcement about Qualcomm Snapdragon 855. A couple of reasons. Number one, this is going to be a 7-nanometer chip. And we've talked a lot about what the future looks like with the 7-nanometer process. And so this is going to be one of the first non-Apple SoCs to be on 7 nanometers. In addition, this is likely to be the chip that powers your high-end Android headsets for the next year or so, through most of 2019. You know, the Snapdragon 835 and 845 and its variants have basically dominated the high-end smartphone market on the Android side for quite some time. And the 855 promises to do that in addition with bringing support for 5G networks.
Mm-hmm.
Is there infrastructure, though?
Well, that's the big question. Is there infrastructure? My guess is it's going to be a lot like when 4G rolled out about 10 years ago. And there's going to be very limited infrastructure in large cities at first, and then it'll spread outward.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, I also linked to AnonTech, and they do a very deep dive on the chip. They do some very interesting stuff.
Yeah, they're always deep dive. They don't play around.
I can imagine when they do get.
Go ahead.
I can imagine when they do get infrastructure for 5G, it'll be cool for certain providers that don't overcharge or charge for extra for like the overage gigs, but they cut down your speed. It's like going from 5G to 4G. That probably won't even seem like a big deal.
Yeah,
because we have in 4G right now. It might be like the same between going from 4G to 3G right now. Like, oh, why is this thing taking so long? If I just don't imagine it would be like a big deal.
We'll just have to see. But
yeah,
it is interesting to me looking at some of the spec sheet. If you follow any of the SoC designs in the last few years, you know that they've taken what's called a big dot little approach, where you have a set of large, powerful, high performance cores that handle burst tasks and burst workloads to make the phone feel snappy and responsive, but also have a set of smaller, lower power cores that are designed to handle background tasks so that the big cores can handle all the heavy intensive workloads. They're continuing that, but they're actually separating out a little further with the 855. They're going to have one Cryo 845 Gold core at 2.84 gigahertz and 3 identical cores but downclocked at 2.42 gigahertz.
With half the cache.
Right, with half the cache. In addition to 4 small cores that are 485 silver, the difference being that the gold are based on ARM's A76 architecture, whereas the silver ones are based on the A55 architecture. which is a lower power, lower performing architecture, with, again, at 1.8 gigahertz with half as much cache again. So 512 for the golden core, 256 for the other three big cores, and 128 for the small cores.
That's an interesting architecture. It's always fun to see how Qualcomm designs these chips to fit within these really limited power envelopes. That seemed to match mobile workloads really well.
Yeah, part of what they note is that with this design, the reason they did it that way is because they say in mobile workloads, there's a lot of workloads where there is a single-threaded process that requires as much performance as possible, and then lower-level background processes that, while more important than what the little cores are designed to handle, need more processing power than that, but not as much as the single bursty core.
Single bursty core?
Well, that's my shorthand for it. Because there are burst workloads. Right. And so for burst workloads that are single-threaded and require a high clock speed, you need a core that can boost for those burst workloads, and thus it's bursty.
You need to trademark that so they pay you.
I don't know. I think Sega already has something on blast processing.
But not bursty core.
Anyway, it's a fascinating read if you want to take a look over at the AnandTech article. I won't try to rehash the whole thing. But you also are getting an improved Adreno GPU. There's not been any information released on the clock speeds on that, but it is the Adreno 640, which is an improvement over the 630 from the previous generation. And remember, the Adreno cores are based on an older version of the Radeon architecture. That's actually why they're called Adreno, because Adreno is an anagram of Radeon.
Interesting.
And they're based on the very long word architecture. I don't remember if it's VLIW4 or VLIW5, but it's from the 6000 series. It's based on that same IP from the 5000 and 6000 series of the Radeon GPUs. So that's actually still in use, just in mobile, because it scales down very well.
There's a nice little sub thing here in the slide. Sub bullet. First to mobile with Vulkan 1.1. Interesting.
Makes sense. Vulkan's designed to be a low overhead API.
Mm-hmm. Got some gaming chops then.
And so be on the lookout. I know the Samsung Galaxy S10 has already been announced to be equipped with the Snapdragon 855. Whenever that comes out sometime next year.
Yeah. Cool.
So
I don't really want to know how it's.
So be on the lookout for a Qualcomm Snapdragon 855 SoC coming to a phone near you.
Yep.
You telegraph that, Ned.
All right. Well, there's been a couple of really big announcements this week. One that at the beginning of the week absolutely dominated the news cycle until the second one came out. So we're going to talk about that first announcement first, and it comes from NVIDIA. And it is for their RTX series, and that was NVIDIA revealed and launched what they're calling the Titan of Turing, the Titan RTX.
Oh.
I've linked in the description down below, in the one tab link, the article from NVIDIA's newsroom, where they talk about the fact that the Titan RTX delivers up to 130 teraflops of deep learning horsepower, up to 11 gigaраys of ray tracing performance, and it features 576 Turing Tensor cores, 72 Turing RT cores, 24 gigabytes of high-speed GDDR6 memory for a total of 672 gigabits per second of bandwidth. It features the 100 gigabits per second NVIDIA NVLink so that you can pair two of these GPUs for compute. And, of course, there is the little matter of the price. Do we want to have any bets on what the price is?
Well, I know what the price is, Ned.
I venture to say a lot more than a 2080 Ti.
Indeed, it is about twice as much as a 2080 Ti. For a model that, based on its specs, should feature about 10 to 15% more performance than the 2080 Ti, you will be paying double the 2080 Ti's MSRP of $1,200. The Titan RTX is available later this month, according to NVIDIA, for the low price of $2,499.
Yeah, 15% more is double. It is. 15% more.
And the problem with that is the Founders Edition. The AIBA partners are going to bump up the price because of their coolers.
Well,
so that's going to be fun.
Traditionally, the Titan hasn't got... Well, the Titan typically does not come in an AIB format. Although they may be manufactured by certain AIBs, NVIDIA has been very tight-fisted about the Titan when it comes to how they're designed.
Okay.
There was a little wiggle room in the past with the original Titan way back in 2013 and the Titan Black that followed it. But after that, NVIDIA's been pretty much, nope, if you're going to make a Titan for us, it's going to feature the Founders Edition's cooler.
You know, 2080 Ti matched last gen Titan's price. And at that, and I don't know, I considered it, and I know a lot of other people considered it just really expensive. And it is very expensive. $2,500 it's just hard to quantify that. I mean, it's getting to a price point anymore where it's hard to imagine. I don't know how to really put this into words. It's beyond the realm of ridiculous now.
Well, I mean, it might be good for certain companies who have a big budget for a certain amount of computers with Quadro video cards, and now they can get a Titan that's probably costs less than a Quadro.
Well, Tom's Hardware points out in their article that the Titan RTX is aimed firmly at people who were looking at either the Titan V previously or at the Quadro RTX 5000.
Yeah.
The Turing features 4,608 CUDA cores, which is about 33% more than the RTX 5000 at 3,072, but is also significantly less than Titan V at 5,120. And so looking at it from that perspective, the fact that it gives 16.3 teraflops of compute, that It features higher clock speeds than its predecessor. It slots in about $500 below the Titan V, while featuring better floating point 32 performance, though slightly weaker performance in other areas. And it only costs $200 more than a Quadro RTX 5000 for significantly better performance. So if you are looking at the Titan RTX, as NVIDIA claims you should, as a professional card designed for compute-intensive tasks, then the pricing makes sense, at least within the pricing structure NVIDIA has set up. But the critical thing here is, does the pricing structure NVIDIA has set up make sense? To the buyer who is most likely to buy a Titan RTX, they're probably not caring because their company's probably buying it.
Yeah, that's true.
I venture to say there may be a few gamers who want the latest and greatest and who will probably buy it for gaming.
You're probably right. There will always be the whales out there who will purchase a Titan RTX because it is the most powerful RTX card on the market.
Bragging rights and having the best having the best game at 4K, 120 hertz, if it can even do that.
And you know, some of it comes back to the fact that when the Titan was originally introduced way back in 2013, it was introduced as a hybrid card. A card that you could use to do professional work and then turn around and game on. Because the original Titan was based on a full version of the, I want to say it was GM 104 from the 700 series. And so the original Titans basically were designed to be hybrid cards that people could use for gaming and for professional work. And because they were priced right at around $1,000 or so, you know, yes, they were top end, but because you could use them for professional work as well, then yeah, that price was kind of justified. Now, NVIDIA has basically taken the card from being a hybrid prosumer card for people who wanted to game and do professional work to being basically a pure professional card. And we see this by virtue of the fact that they've dropped the GeForce branding from the Titan altogether.
So I wonder. So okay, so you've got what, 130 teraflops? Is that 64?
The 130 teraflops, they say, of deep learning performance.
So, but that doesn't tell me if that's E 64, 32, 16.
Well, they claim FP32 performance for compute is 16.3 teraflops. So if I had to guess, the 130 teraflops is probably single precision.
Vega 64 is around 13 and a half somewhere.
For single precision or for FP32?
I believe FP32.
Okay.
I don't know about single. Frontier Edition is going to be around the same. So I'm just trying to think of a devil's advocate And Vega is the best thing I can come up with because it's also got really good compute, but its pricing is significantly less. But then the Turing Titan here has some significant advantages too.
Yeah, it is a far heftier card. It's a 754 millimeter die size.
Mm.
And even if you factor in the extra die area for the HBM2 on Vega, I think Turing has it significantly beat.
I'd have to agree. And it does have better memory bandwidth as well.
So, Titan RTX, it's out. And if you have $2,500 burning a hole in your pocket, by the end of this month, you'll be able to buy one.
Yeah, 13.1 single precision FP32. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
So yeah, in that case, the Titan RTX has about 3 teraflop, well, 2.5 teraflops of FP32 compute performance over it.
But then again, Vega Frontier Edition is $1,000 for the air-cooled card. So
yeah,
I don't know. That's interesting. You can effectively have 2 Vega cards versus 1 Titan. That would be an interesting benchmark run to see what workflows are better for both. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That would be interesting. Sorry, didn't mean to.
So it's fine. I think that's pretty much all there is to say at this point on Titan RTX. We'll keep our eyes peeled for benchmark numbers, for additional information. Honestly, I expect it to perform better than the 2080 Ti, but not by a huge enough margin to really justify its price, unless you're doing purely professional workloads.
Mm-hmm.
So that brings us to the last topic, and this one is kind of a big one, and it kind of is overshadowed NVIDIA's announcement earlier this week, because if what is said in these leaks are true, then AMD has a monster pair in the Zen 2 CPUs and the Navi GPU. And so the original leak here came from a video produced and released by Adored TV, which again, I've included in the list of links down below. But there's been some other leaks as well that provide us additional information. Like I said, I provided a link to the original video, and he goes into a lot of detail about the Ryzen 3000 series, as well as what he claims will be the Navi-based Radeon RX 3000 series. Yes, apparently AMD is lifting a page out of NVIDIA's book, and they are going to release their next series to be 1,000 higher as the 3000 series.
Well, and to put it into perspective, this is the same guy that was right about the RTX.
Yes, and he released it a full 2 weeks before it came out.
Yep. Where everyone else was saying GTX, blah.
Yeah.
He was saying RTX.
So, Adored TV has a pretty solid track record on his leaks. He, being an industry analyst, is usually pretty good about vetting his stuff before he releases it.
Yeah.
But there was actually a small leak before this, and this was from a Gigabyte slide deck that got released, talking about AMD's X570 chipset. And so this release from a gigabyte slide deck, I'll actually share this so that everybody can see it. So this slide deck, as we can see, shows a timeline for the future of AMD's chipsets. And you'll notice that over here on the left, you have the current release, what's marked as second half 2018, and then part of this is scratched out because it was, again, from a do not release slide deck. And you'll notice that they talk about an X570 launching at Computex,
which is May 28th to June 1.
Correct. So if AMD is indeed going to launch the X570 chipset at Computex, it means we could be waiting a little bit longer for the Ryzen 3000 series than we originally thought. You know, they've released Ryzen in March each year, but we also know that AMD's CEO, Dr. Lisa Su, is going to be talking about AMD's 7-nanometer chips, both CPU and GPU, at CES next month, January 2019. So that provides us some very interesting information about Ryzen 3000 series on the Zen 2 cores. Again, this is another leak from a Taiwanese gaming forum, so your mileage may vary.
Grain of salt.
Yeah. As with all leaks, grain of salt. So that was what came out first. And then Adored TV dropped his bombshell of a video where he talked about the Ryzen 3000 series with a very interesting setup.
I'll say.
Apparently, if what his source says is true, we could see an entire new tier of Ryzen 3000 series GPUs or CPUs, in addition to the Ryzen 3, Ryzen 5, and Ryzen 7, perhaps as a response to Intel releasing a Core i9 in their mainstream. Apparently, AMD is also looking to release a Ryzen 9 series. The Ryzen 9 3800 and 3850X, which are supposed to feature up to 16 cores and 32 threads on a mainstream chipset.
For less money, potentially. Less money.
But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start at the bottom of the stack.
Right.
Presently, the Ryzen 3 2200G is at the bottom of AMD's Ryzen stack with 4 cores, 4 threads, and a Vega 8 integrated GPU, all based on the 14-nanometer process. The new Ryzen 3000 series has a Ryzen 3 3300 at the bottom of the stack with 6 cores, 12 threads. Yes, you heard that correctly. A base clock of 3.2 gigahertz, a boost clock of 4.0 gigahertz, and a 50-watt TDP.
So Ryzen 5, so current Ryzen 5, essentially what that means is current Ryzen 5 being 6-core 12-thread is moving down a stack to Ryzen 3. With
essentially, yes.
Yes.
And the And the 3300 is, from what I read, is also going to have 20 compute units of Vega.
It's going to have 15. If what
15,
the slide
okay.
says is correct, it's going to have 15.
That's what I was just about to mention. There is going to be a G variant, the 3300G, which will still be 6 cores, 12 threads, but will have a 15 compute unit Navi-based GPU.
Yeah, that's another important consideration. Navi compute units.
Yeah,
Not
with
Polaris,
us not knowing
not
what
Vega.
Navi performance looks like just yet,
Yeah.
that it could be considerable. So the next tier, the Ryzen 5 series, you have the 3600, the 3600X, and the 3600G. And these are essentially going to be equivalent to the current generation's Ryzen 7s with 8 cores and 16 threads, but with much higher clock speeds.
And less power.
Apparently, these chips are going to have base clocks of 4 gigahertz and boost clocks of 4.8 gigahertz. Good grief, they're starting to sound like an Intel part at this point.
Well, that's the scary thing. A $200-ish X part, Ryzen 5 X part, could be basically trading blows with the Core i9 9900K at $600-ish.
And if this is to be believed, at a far lower TDP.
Well, the TDP of them are identical on paper, but...
Well, we also know the 9900K's TDP specification gets routinely abused.
Right. Well, if we're looking at a 7-nanometer part, you could potentially have the same clock speed range. If they're talking 4.8 boost, an X part, I mean, if they follow, if all of these parts are using the same overclocking restrictions as current Ryzen parts, as in they're not restricted, they're unlocked, who knows what these parts will be capable of, because all of the current parts are soldered except for the APUs. So,
and that does,
with this being a fully modular chiplet design, who knows what the thermal characteristics are going to be like.
Right. We've seen how chiplets can change the game with something like Threadripper.
Yeah.
And so speaking of APU, though, there will be a Ryzen 5 3600G, which again is 8 cores, 16 threads, but will also feature a Navi GPU with 20 compute units.
That's the part I'm looking for. I want to see I want to see what kind of chops that part's got.
I imagine you will likely trade lower CPU speeds for that on-die GPU, but even so.
Well, I'm thinking Polaris. I'm thinking RX 580 performance potentially here.
That's what one of the articles I saw said, is it'll be RX 580 4 gig performance, I believe.
Oh, okay. I think you're talking. So I think in the same YouTube video, it was.
Oh, no. I got that
performance.
Yeah, that's what I got mixed up on, is Navi performance. No,
I'm just thinking. I'm just thinking what this APU could potentially do.
Yeah.
I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility that this could have.
If that APU has 580, then that would be really nice.
I mean, even if with those 20 Navi GPU units, or those 20 compute units of Navi, if it even achieved RX 570 levels of performance, that's significant.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Everyone's still going to be running 1080p when this thing comes out. So $500 gaming computer. Boom. Right there. 8 cores, 16 threads, 16
Yeah.
gigs of RAM. Like, gosh, you don't need a video card.
Yeah.
I mean, just
You
look
get
at the
a
Ryzen
really
5.
nice system right there.
I mean, look at the current Ryzen 5 2400G. That
It's not
system will,
bad.
that system with the Vega 11 GPU that's baked into it can play 1080p low.
Yeah.
And if you're willing to spring for the pricey memory, even up to 1080p medium.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So then this would do possibly 1080p medium to high?
You're thinking
If you paired it with pricey memory.
probably ultra.
That's quite insane.
Higher ultra, yeah.
That's really insane because you're
talking you're talking 1050 Ti to 1060, 570 to 580, somewhere in that ballpark.
Shoot.
Potentially.
I could Dell Optiplex computer with that. I wouldn't need to deal with the video card length limiting factors.
And we'll just have to see. Not to be outdone, the new Ryzen 7 3700 and 3700X, which apparently are going to be priced at $299 and $329 respectively. Again, that's roughly in line with their current generation counterparts. But they're going to be featuring 12 physical cores and 24 logical threads.
Now you're entering Threadripper territory.
Right. This is basically, if this is to be believed, the 3700 and 3700X are basically going to be the equivalent of the current Threadripper 2920X.
Yep. 3700X, 12 core, 24 thread, up to 5 gigahertz boost for the same power envelope as the 2700X.
That's in. Again, if this is, it seems almost too good to be true. But if this is even close to correct,
I don't know. If you look at 7 nanometer and the difference in performance from moving from 12 to 7 nanometer, and you look at power envelope S curves, this is possible. And they've been QAing these chiplets for a while now. So this is very possible.
And of course, as I mentioned, the Ryzen 7 is no longer the top of the stack. Again, if this leak is to be believed, Ryzen 9 will feature the 3800X and the 3850X, featuring 16 cores and 32 threads with clock speeds up to 5.1 gigahertz.
So I'm picturing like this is beast mode time right here. And this is like, so you've got the schoolyard, right? You've got the big bully Intel beating up on AMD every single day. Well, then AMD goes to the gym, comes back, and he's bigger than the bully, and then beats up the bully. And then AMD is like, well, you started it because you came out with Core i9.
Of course, these are going to feature significantly higher TDP than Ryzen 7 did previously. Right. The 3800X will have a base clock of 3.9 gigahertz and a boost of 4.7 with 125 watt TDP. Whereas the 3850X will have a base clock of 4.3 gigahertz and a boost clock of 5.1 gigahertz on 135 watt TDP. And I imagine
clock
if
of
you
4.3. That's
yeah, right.
That's
considering
insane.
that my 1800X right now will typically only turbo boost, or excuse me, precision boost overdrive to roughly 4.1, 4.0, 4.1 on a good day. The idea of having a base clock of 4.3 gigahertz with twice as many cores and twice as many threads seems like pure insanity.
And you're probably seeing clocks on average, if you're looking at 1800X or even 2000X parts. If you look at CPU-Z and just seeing how it clocks up and down all the time, you're probably, if the behavior is the same, you're probably looking at 4.9, 5 gigahertz, 4.8. You know, those clock speed differences.
But
I don't know.
The thing is, the leaks aren't done, because there's also leaks about the Navi RX 3000 series.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, AMD is going to try to steal a little bit of NVIDIA's thunder by naming their Navi GPUs the RX 3000 series, rather than continuing with the current 600 series, or 500 to 600 series. I'm not sure I agree with the logic there, but you know what? That's their marketing decision to make. But again, this information also comes from Adored TV. His source paints a Radeon RX 3000 or 3080 based on the Navi 10 GPU for $249.99 with 8 gigabytes of GDDR6, a 150 watt TDP, and 15% higher performance than Vega 64.
Which is pretty significant because that's right around GTX 1080.
Right. The Vega 64 swaps blows with the GTX 1080. So imagine a new Radeon mid-range part that swaps blows with a GTX 1080.
Or RTX 2070. I mean, it's if it's to be believed, it's better than RTX. So it would sit between RTX 2070 and 2080 with significantly better TDP.
And at half the price of an RTX 2070.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, the base price for the RTX 2070 is $500.
And that's for the cheap ones. Like, if you want the good ones, the overclocked ones and all that stuff, that's $600, if not.
Yeah.
Between 600 and 650 from what I've seen. So 150 watt TDP. So it's like having it's like sipping GTX 1070 power. Or if you want to go older, RX 480 power. So it's like
that's
480 power, but performing like slightly better than slightly better than Vega 64. RTX 2070, GTX 1080. So GTX 1080 was right around a 200 to 220 watt TDP. RTX 2070 is right around 240 watt TDP. That's crazy. The power of the 7 nanometer. Anyway, I like the fact that they're going to GDDR6.
Yes, it was about time.
The reason why is cost for one, heat for another, but on the modding scene, so I don't know why, but I got wrapped up into this whole modding thing with Vega. And kind of addicted to that, but when you're looking at aftermarket coolers and stuff, it's a little easier to find aftermarket coolers that are compatible with DDR type memory specs versus HBM, because HBM is a very unique die size, versus just cooling GDDR. With GDDR, all you have to do is apply some heat pads, and then you've got some sort of a plate to put on top of it. Like you put heat pads on your VRM, your chokes, and your memory, and then you put a base plate on top of that. Whether that's an air cooler with some heat pipes or a water block. It's a lot easier to mod and cool. So I don't know what the power characteristics are of DDR6 or DDR5 versus HBM, but
Well, I'm not particularly versed with those power specs either, but of course the 3080, again, based on the name we've been given, is not the only GPU to look at. There's also the RX 3070, which is based on the Navi 12 GPU, be selling for right around $199.99. It will also feature 8 gigabytes of GDDR6, but will have a 120 watt TDP while offering performance equivalent to Vega 56 or the GTX 1070. So, Jason, I know you have a Vega 56.
Mm-hmm.
And we have made the joke several times on the podcast that thing can be a black hole for power.
It is. It is. But you get rewards from consuming that much power. And the fact is that, silicone lottery applies, but it seems like all of these parts are really bend very, very well. This is crazy, man. 120 watt TDP for the performance I was seeing at stock.
Right. In Vega 56, remember, I think the specification for Vega 56 is something like a 250 watt part.
Well, it's got a 210 watt TDP.
Okay.
You can, if you don't mess with anything, if other than Wattman or an overclocking tool, you are allowed to increase the 210 watts by 50%. So you can give it more power. But the PCB and the VRMs are actually rated for 450 watts.
Wow.
Yeah. I did the calculations myself. 450 watts. It's because it's the same exact PCP that they're offering on the Frontier Edition. So
Makes sense. I mean, only have to make one PCB instead of multiple different ones.
Yeah, one PCB. The Vega 64 and 56 chips are completely identical. Memory is the same. It's just in the BIOSes where things get locked down. Like they have very specific parameters. The Vega 56 BIOS allows for a 210 watt TDP, and then you can go 50% above that. The Vega 64 BIOS allows for and then there's specific GPU and HBM voltages. They're going to be less on the 56 BIOS, but then the 64 BIOS allows for higher GPU and HBM voltages, as well as higher clocks and boost clocks, but also a significantly higher TDP. Like the TDP allowed for on the 64, I want to say is right around 250 to 300 watts. And then you can go 50% above that. So
impressive.
Yeah. And then there's a level of BIOS that's on top of that. So
yeah, that's if you go in and edit the P tables, right?
No, P tables are separate. So P tables are in their registry. And the only thing that you're allowed to modify in the P table is the what do they call that? Let me pull up my Radeon settings here. Is the power, what is it called? Power limit. That's what it is. So stock, you're allowed a power limit increase or decrease of 50%. If you modify a hexadecimal value in the P table, you can change that to whatever you want. I've gone as high as 150%. And that's when you start looking at some crazy wattages. Like I've seen as high as 380 watts on my card. But then again, I'm going up to 1.7 gigahertz then at that point.
Right.
In stock, this card, like I said, is 210 watts. So, and I want to say a boost speed of up to 1.5 gigahertz. But normally at stock, I was seeing like 1.3, 1.4 at most. Now consistently I'm seeing 1650 to 1700 megahertz consistently. That's what the Morpheus 2 cool is. And I've just got the Vega 64 BIOS. And my memory frequency has gone from 1600 to 2200. So this thing is a power hog for sure, but it rewards you with performance. So being an overclocker, I don't care. It can eat as much power as it wants, as long as they don't destroy the power supply. So sorry, I didn't mean to get off on a tangent. I'm very passionate Vega owner.
There's actually one more in the stack from what was revealed, and that is the RX 3060. This is also built on the Navi 12 GPU. This is the one that interests me.
Yeah, me too.
Because at $130, it features 4 gigabytes of GDDR6, a 75-watt TDP, meaning that it wouldn't require a 6-pin. You could literally drop it into a pre-built if you wanted to. But it's supposed to produce RX 580 level performance.
Yeah.
Now, I'm an RX 480 owner that has my chips, that has my GPUs lightly overclocked to roughly RX 580 levels. Not like the super overclocked RX 580, but like the RX 580 stock specifications. Which is not that hefty an overclock. RX 480 can do it pretty easily. But you do get a significant uptick in heat. Officially, the RX 480, I believe, is a 150 watt, 5 watt TDP part. The RX 580 was officially a 185 watt TDP part.
Mm-hmm.
To be able to take that and cut it over half, down to like 40% of that, is absolutely impressive.
Well, yeah, think about all the applications for this type of part. I mean, it requires no external power. You know, it runs completely off the power of the slot. So that's what makes this card so attractive.
So many ITX builds.
Yeah.
And
small form factor.
Business. Yeah.
Business.
That means Dell's going to have a lot of fun.
Yep.
And HP's going to have a lot of fun.
This could potentially be a very popular card for OEMs.
Yep.
Yep. And along the same line of the GTX 750 Ti or the current GTX 1050 Ti.
Yep.
Well, doesn't the 1050 Ti require?
It depends on the configuration.
Oh, okay.
There are...
If you get the single fan card, no. If you get the dual fan card, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, it depends on who's building it and what configuration you get.
Gotcha.
And if it's overclocked.
Yeah, if it's an overclocked model, it usually will have a single 6-pin.
Okay.
If it's a stock clocked model, it usually has... It doesn't. And that was the same problem you'd run into with the GTX 750 Ti as well. Some of the overclocked versions of them also had 6 pins and wouldn't work, or well, they would work unless you put them under severe load without the 6-pin. But
so not to jump off to a tangent, but if I'm looking at, okay, which would I rather have? an RX 570 or a 1050 Ti. I'm sorry, but the 570 wins in my mind 10 times out of 10. 1050 Ti is a good part, but it's not RX 570. You know what I mean?
Right. No, I totally get why you'd say that. The RX 570 right now is cheaper than the GTX 1050 Ti. Most places you can
But the
find it online.
GTX, but the 1050 Ti is faster.
No, it's not.
Well, it depends on the game, but usually in NVIDIA sponsored titles, yes, the GTX 1050 Ti can either trade blows or be a slightly bit faster than the RX 570. But in most games, the RX 570 will run away with it.
Yeah.
Give me an afternoon with a 570. Games. Give me an afternoon with a decent 570 card, and we'll get it.
Yeah, DX12 games, the 570 and 580 are better than NVIDIA parts. I've seen the benchmarks for that.
Yeah, the 1050 Ti right now is significantly more expensive than the RX 570, particularly the 574 gig models, which would normally fight with the 1050 Ti. And, you know, you're right. If I'm the one doing the buying, I'm going to pick the RX 570. But some people prefer the NVIDIA ecosystem. I mean, I got to admit, Shadow Play for me generally works better than Radeon Relive.
Well, Radeon Relive is gotten a lot better.
I mean, that's fair. I honestly, most of the time anymore, I just use OBS. But
well, that's because you and I both have 16-thread parts,
so. Right? And because software rendering, as good as hardware rendering has gotten, software rendering is generally better if you've got a part that can handle it.
Right.
So, with all that said, we've talked a lot about a bunch of parts that you can look forward to buying, or that if you have very deep pockets, can buy in the near future. But if you want to buy something right now, well, we do have a single deal. And if this seems like a little bit of deja vu, it's kind of because it is. Because we featured this particular motherboard last week as a value option B350 motherboard for an entry-level Ryzen system. And it's the ASRock AB350M Pro 4. Well, why are we featuring it again? Because this week, it's $10 cheaper than it was last week. So, it's currently on sale on Newegg for $64.99. But there's also a $20 rebate from ASRock, which means your final price for this motherboard, which for an entry-level B350 board has a pretty solid VRM solution and features 4 DIMM slots for RAM and 2 full PCIe Express 16 slots, is only going to cost you $45. Now, again, temper your expectations. You're not going to put a Ryzen 7 2700X and expect to overclock it to within an inch of its life.
No, you have to melt the VRMs off on this thing if you do that.
But if you're looking for a system for your Ryzen 3 2200G or Ryzen 5 2400G, or maybe even your Ryzen 5 2600, this will handle that.
Mm-hmm. That's the intriguing thing about this. For a budget, so say a person's just getting into PC gaming or is heavily budget constrained, but wants an okay gamer, you know, I would love to see how this board would perform with a 2400G and somebody that's kind of smart with good RAM, because this will handle a four core part just fine, and the heat sinks on the VRM will handle an APU even overclocked. Um,
Should also be noted, it does come with an Ultra M.2 slot, so it will handle your NVMe SSD.
they're well, it's got two M.2 slots.
Yeah, it's got two.
Right. It has the main one that's marked as Ultra M.2, and then it has the other one hidden down there on the corner of the board. Because I think that one is SATA.
Yeah, so basically like that I have. Or that I'm waiting for.
Actually, I could think of a nice $400 build for this thing. Actually, 16 gigs of 32 or 3400 megahertz RAM. Ooh, oh gosh, I would love to put a build in this thing just to see what it'd be like. 2400 gig.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of the show this week. Gentlemen, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Nope.
No, I'm looking forward to Computex. I want to jump forward in time. There's a lot of intriguing parts in that list. I mean, all of them are pretty much for different use cases, but that Ryzen 5 APU,
Yeah.
and then the X Ryzen 7 and Ryzen 9 parts, obviously, but
I definitely want to see benchmarks for the Ryzen 5 APU. It's going to make building a lot better.
Yeah, I've been considering. My parents have a PC that's very long in the tooth, and I've been considering upgrading them to a Ryzen 5 2400G, just as a simple basic upgrade. But now I kind of want to wait for Ryzen 5 3600G.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be for much more money if those prices are to be expected. Ryzen 5 2400G is around 150 to 160, so $40 more.
And right? It would be slightly overkill for their needs, but they wouldn't need another upgrade for probably another 5 years,
if not longer. I mean, you're talking about a 4 gigahertz 16 thread part, man.
That could be put in a gaming HTPC build.
Oh, yeah. A gaming streaming HTPC build.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder. So here's the thought that just crept to mind. They're talking about how the new Xbox and the PS5 are going to be 8-core parts. I wonder if that's the same part or maybe a slight derivative of what they're putting in the console.
It wouldn't surprise me.
20 CUs, man.
Yeah.
2400G has 11 CUs or 10 CUs.
Well, if that's for 1080p high to ultra, then that's the low end for what they're doing right now. They're boasting like 4K, 30 hertz or 60 hertz, depending on what they are saying. So I don't know if I could see that APU, because then they would go back down to 1080p ultra.
Well, don't
gaming.
Forget the way they're achieving that 4K 30 hertz. It's technically not true 4K. A lot of it is upscaled.
Super sampling.
Yeah.
Through super sampling.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, we didn't get around to it because there just wasn't room in the show, but there has been some talk that Xbox Scarlett, which is supposed to be the successor to the Xbox One X, is supposed to feature an 8-core Zen 2 part with a Navi GPU. So, remember, with a console, they're able to tailor the game and the operating system more closely to the hardware than on a general PC.
Yeah.
So they might be able to wring that extra bit of performance. The fact that with the current GPU that's in the Xbox One, which, by the way, is roughly equivalent to an RX 470.
Hmm.
They're able to get
4K 30 hertz.
Yeah. And, well,
Upscaled, of course, but...
Well, I know they can do 1080 at 60.
Right.
Yeah.
Probably medium to high detail as to what we're used to on the PC level. But that's also with a very weak CPU.
Yes. You're talking about based on Jaguar cores from like about 2012-ish. And Jaguar, remember, was the low power variant of Excavator.
Mm-hmm.
Which pile driver was faster?
Going back to the deal of the show, motherboard, the $20 mail-in rebate will expire on December 10th, which is in 4 days.
From the time we record this show, and 3 days from the time that most people will be seeing it for the first time. So be aware of that.
Get in there, get that board, get your APU, get your budget build set up and ready to go. Come on now.
Yep.
And
still
have a solid base
$65
build.
is not bad.
No.
I mean, even without the rebate, for $65, it's still pretty much a steal.
Oh, absolutely.
And that has two M.2 slots, which is pretty nice.
Indeed.
Yeah, as long as your expectations are realistic.
Yeah.
Now, I will say this, and it might be misinterpreted. Can you run a Ryzen 7 2700 on this, or a 2700X? Yes. Are you going to be overclocking with it? No.
There's no way I'd do that. There's no way.
I wouldn't recommend running a Ryzen 7 on this board. Yeah. Can you do it? Technically, yes. Would I recommend it? No.
What if you don't overclock it?
That VRM solution, unless you have some good cooling on it, it's going to be real touch and go.
Even if you
thermal pads on it?
No, I wouldn't even recommend a 2700X on an X470 south of 150 bucks. Because the 2700X, it's pretty intelligent. It'll boost itself automatically. I mean, it's not even worth overclocking it, honestly. If you try and enable PBR and you're doing multi-threaded workloads, this thing will shut down. Guaranteed.
Duly noted.
No. No. Maybe a 1700.
Yeah, it could probably handle a
700. Yeah, stock, no overclock.
Yeah, maybe the non-X parts, but like I said, this would be a perfect board for your Ryzen 5 2400G, your Ryzen 5 1600 or 2600. Yeah. Of course, remember, it is a B350 board, so if you're going to do that, make sure that it has the right BIOS first.
Yep.
And that's a 3-phase VRM. FYI. That's a 3x2. I'm pretty sure. Anything 4-core is absolutely fine. Low-end 6-core, that's where I would draw the line, honestly. I wouldn't put an X part on this that's a 6-core or above. But it's a $65 board. So
again, keep your expectations reasonable and it will do exactly what you need.
Right.
Yep. It's got a Realtek gigabit LAN port, which is nice.
Mm-hmm. And the video out's more flexible than most that I've seen.
Yeah, you have what's that?
HDMI, DVI-D, VGA. So you could potentially run 2 monitors off of this, or a lot of the video outs only have like a single HDMI out or DisplayPort out.
And it does have USB 3.1. I
Yeah.
don't know if it's Gen 1 or Gen 2.
Type 1 Type C port, which is nice. So those external hard drives that have Type C. Like I have one now.
And by the way, we were talking about the M.2 slot earlier. One is PCIe Gen 3 times 4, and the other one is SATA 3. So the Ultra M.2, the one that's marked, is the PCIe one. That'll handle your NVMe drives. Whereas the other M.2 that's unmarked at the bottom corner of the board will handle all your SATA 3 drives.
So that would be good as a small form factor APU build.
Yeah, it certainly would.
Well, it's got better video out than the X470 Tai Chi, the Crosshair 7, and I want to say the Gaming 7 Wi-Fi, maybe? The Crosshair 7 has no video out. Tai Chi has one slot. I think it's HDMI. But then again, those are $200+ boards that, people aren't going to be putting
$100 APUs on.
Right. Yeah, my Gaming 7 has no video out at all.
Duly noted.
So,
well, gentlemen, we've been going for almost 2 hours at this point. So, for the sake of everyone watching, I think we probably need to wrap it up. If you've enjoyed what you've seen this evening, of course, you can check out our playlist of all of our TechForge shows so far, and you can watch us as we talk nerdy about tech. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here, you can check out all our other content over on the CrossForge Gaming YouTube channel, as well as links to our Twitch and our Discord community, which will be down below in the description.
where?
And so, I've been Ned, and from the TechForge team, we'd like to say thank you for watching, and remember, when life has you down,
Waiting for it.
forge on.
Yeah!
Yep.